A rainy night, a quiet cafe, and a single dad who never expected his life to change. Susan, a hardworking father, steps in when a dangerous stranger targets a young woman at dinner. He saves Brina, the daughter of a billionaire CEO, without knowing who she really is. One fight, one brave moment, and two hearts that quietly connect. Days later, a black limo stops outside his small house, and Brina steps out searching for him. Not because he saved her life, but because she saw his heart. A humble single dad, a lonely rich girl, two worlds that were never meant to meet. But kindness has its own destiny, and sometimes love arrives softly, like rain on a quiet night. This story will melt your heart and remind you that true value comes from courage, not money. A gentle romance, a powerful lesson, and a love story born in the most unexpected place. The night wrapped the city in a cold, restless silence as rain poured from the dark sky, striking the windows of Maple Street Cafe like thousands of soft tapping fingers. The tiny cafe glowed warmly against the storm, its golden lights spilling across wooden tables and polished floors. Inside, the hum of quiet conversations, mixed with the soft music playing from the old speakers, creating a cozy island of peace in the middle of a stormy world. Susan pushed open the cafe door with a tired breath, his shoulders heavy from a long day of working two jobs. Raindrops clung to his hair and jacket, and his boots made small, wet marks on the floor as he stepped inside. He wasn't there for food, or even coffee. He just needed a place where his mind could rest for a few minutes. A place where he wasn't a worker, a provider, or a man constantly trying to hold life together. He had just dropped off his little girl, Emily, at his sister's house, giving her a warm kiss on her forehead before returning to the cold reality of adulthood. He chose a small corner booth, the one farthest from the door, where he could sit quietly and let the warmth seep into his tired bones. As he leaned back, he let out a sigh that came from deep inside his chest. The kind of sigh only a single parent understood. His life had been a long chain of responsibilities, sacrifices, and small victories that no one noticed but him. And still he kept going, because Emily's smile made every hard day worth surviving. What he didn't know was that tonight, his life was silently turning towards something he never expected. Something that would rewrite the path of his future with gentle, unpredictable hands. At that exact moment, the cafe door opened again, letting in a soft rush of cold air and the delicate sound of raindrops from outside. A young woman stepped in, elegant, graceful, and carrying an aura of quiet sadness behind her perfect posture. She shook the rain from her coat and brushed her long hair back, revealing a face that looked like it belonged to a world far richer, far cleaner, far safer than the one Susan lived in. Her name was Brina, the only daughter of a billionaire CEO, though no one in the cafe knew that. Her life looked perfect from a distance, but her heart carried a loneliness she never showed in public. She wasn't here for attention or luxury. She had slipped away from her guarded world simply to feel normal for once, to sit in a place where no one bowed, judged, or expected anything from her. Brina walked slowly to a table near the wide window, choosing the seat where she could watch the rain slide down the glass like silver threads. Her fingers lightly touched the cold window pane, and for a moment she closed her eyes, breathing in the warmth of the cafe as if she needed it more than the food she ordered. She didn't notice Susan at first, the quiet man in the corner with gentle eyes and a heart full of unspoken stories. And Susan didn't notice her, the lonely heiress trying to hide her sadness behind soft smiles. But the rain, the storm, and fate had brought them into the same cafe. On the same night, in the same moment, a moment that looked ordinary but carried the weight of destiny. A moment where two different worlds unknowingly took their first step toward each other. And in the soft glow of Maple Street Cafe, under the rhythm of falling rain, their lives waited to collide in a way that would change everything forever. Brina waited patiently for her food, gently tapping her fingers against the table while watching raindrops race each other down the window. She tried to distract herself by looking at the warm lights and listening to the soft chatter around her. But something kept pulling at the back of her mind, an odd, unsettling feeling she couldn't shake. It was the kind of instinct that starts as a whisper in the chest before it becomes a warning. She glanced around casually, pretending to adjust her napkin, and that's when she noticed him. The man sitting across the cafe, hunched slightly forward, eyes locked onto her like he was studying every blink, every breath. His stare wasn't the normal curious glance people sometimes give strangers. This one felt sharp, heavy, invasive. It made her stomach tighten in a way she hadn't felt in years. Brina tried brushing it off. She told herself he was probably just tired or distracted, maybe even confused. She had spent most of her life being watched by security teams, business associates, people who recognized her last name. She knew what normal attention felt like. This wasn't it. She forced her eyes back to her phone, pretending to check messages, but she could feel his gaze burning into her skin. It made the cozy cafe feel smaller, as if the walls were quietly closing in. She shifted in her seat, brushed her hair behind her ear, and tried to breathe through the unease. But then the man moved. He pushed his chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the wooden floor with a sound that made Brina's heart jump. He rose to his feet with a stiffness that wasn't normal, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight. His eyes never left her. He took one step, then another, walking toward her table with a strange, determined heaviness in his stride. Brina's throat tightened. She tried pretending she didn't notice him, but the air suddenly felt colder as he came closer. She curled her fingers slightly, gripping the edge of the table as if it could protect her. And across the cafe, Susan saw it all. He had been quietly sipping his coffee, lost in the weight of his own day, when his protective instincts flickered awake. The moment that man stood up, Susan's eyes sharpened. He recognized that expression, the unsettling mix of anger and possession, something he had seen before in his part-time security shifts, a look that meant something was wrong. His muscles tensed before his mind even processed the thought. Years of responsibility and silent courage had wired him to notice danger faster than most people. Susan watched the man's body language, the stiff shoulders, the hands slipping into his jacket pocket, the cold intensity in his stare. Brina, innocent of the threat moving toward her, simply blinked up from her phone, unaware that she was seconds away from something terrifying. Susan felt his pulse pick up. A quiet voice in his chest whispered, "This isn't right. She's not safe." He pushed his coffee aside, rising quietly, never taking his eyes off the stranger. There was no fear on Susan's face, only a deep, steady protectiveness, born from years of fighting through life and shielding the people he loved. Brina still didn't know she was being hunted, but Susan did. And he was already moving, because danger had taken its first step toward her, and he wasn't about to let it take another. The stranger stopped right beside Brina's table, his shadow falling over her like a cold curtain. She felt him before she fully saw him. His presence was unsettling, heavy, wrong. When she finally looked up, his face was too close, his breath touching her cheek and his eyes. His eyes were filled with something dark, something desperate. He leaned down and whispered something she couldn't fully understand. Just fragments of words, broken and frightening. Yet even without hearing everything, her body reacted instantly. Her fingers trembled around her napkin. Her heartbeat raced wildly, almost painfully. A cold wave washed over her spine. It felt like her soul had pulled back in fear before she could even think. She didn't move. She couldn't. Her throat tightened and her mind blurred with panic. And across the cafe, Susan saw the moment her face changed, the moment fear replaced confusion. He didn't hesitate. He stood up so fast his chair didn't even make a sound. His body moved before his thoughts caught up, guided by instinct, by something protective and fierce that lived deep inside him. With calm, controlled steps, he crossed the space between them. He approached silently, but his presence was strong, steady, like a shield forming out of nowhere. Brina's eyes darted to him the second he reached her table. Her face was pale. Her breath came in small, shattered pieces. She looked like someone trapped in a nightmare. Susan positioned himself just inches from her, gently shifting between her and the stranger's looming figure. He didn't shove, didn't yell. He simply stood like a quiet wall of safety. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice low enough that only she could clearly hear it. "You need to move away from the table slowly." His calmness was so out of place compared to the fear tightening her chest that it almost broke her. She blinked at him, confused, terrified. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to ask why, but couldn't get the air to speak. Susan didn't take his eyes off the stranger, not for a second. "He has something in his jacket," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The words hit her like ice. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands went cold. Before Brina could react, the man's expression twisted. His face tightened with frustration, with anger at being interrupted. His hand shot forward, and he grabbed her wrist so harshly she gasped aloud. Pain flashed up her arm. Her chair scraped backward as she instinctively tried to pull away. But the man never expected Susan. In one fluid motion, quick, precise, fierce, Susan's hand locked around the stranger's arm. His grip was strong enough to stop the movement instantly. His other hand twisted the attacker's wrist away from Brina with a practiced motion that came from real experience, not luck. The stranger's fingers broke free from her skin, and he stumbled back half a step, shocked by Susan's strength. Brina pressed a hand to her chest, breath shaking, her pulse hammering. She stared at Susan in disbelief, at the way he stood completely focused, completely fearless, as though protecting her was the only thing that mattered in that moment. The cafe's warm lights flickered across Susan's face, and in that split second, Brina realized something she had never expected from a quiet stranger in a small restaurant. He wasn't just someone who noticed. He was someone who acted, someone who stepped between her and fear without thinking twice. And she wasn't alone anymore. For a moment, everything inside Maple Street Cafe froze. The soft music, the clinking plates, the murmured conversations. All of it vanished into a heavy, breathless silence. Diners turned in shock, their eyes widening, their bodies tensing as they realized something terrible was unfolding right in front of them. Brina's breath hitched as the man took a step back, his face twisting with frustration and rage. Then, with a sudden, jerking motion, he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small knife. The blade glinted under the warm cafe lights, cold and merciless. A sharp gasp escaped Brina's lips. Her heart felt like it had stopped and then launched into a painful, frantic race. She backed up instinctively, her knees hitting the edge of her chair. Before fear could consume her, Susan stepped in front of her, his body shielding hers completely. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He simply moved, like someone who had been protecting others his whole life. The attacker lunged forward, the knife slicing through the air, and the cafe erupted into chaos. Chairs screeched across the floor as customers jumped back. A waitress screamed. A couple near the door ran outside, stumbling into the stormy night. Someone shouted for help, but their voice drowned beneath the growing panic. Rain pounded harder against the windows, each drop sounding like the sky itself was warning them, crying out, pushing everyone to escape. Lightning flashed faintly outside, illuminating the terror inside the cafe with harsh white bursts. But Susan stayed still, focused, grounded. The knife came toward him, and with a swift movement he raised his forearm, blocking it. Pain shot up his arm, but he didn't flinch, not even for a second. His eyes were locked onto the attackers, burning with determination, with a fierce protectiveness that came from deep inside him. He grabbed the man's arm, using his strength and training, twisting it just enough to break the momentum. The stranger stumbled but tried again, slashing wildly. Tables shook. A glass shattered. Two people huddled in the corner, terrified. Susan pushed the attacker back, slamming him against a wooden table so hard the entire restaurant gasped. The knife clattered to the floor, skidding across the tile and landing beneath a chair. The attacker realized he was losing. He shoved Susan away and tried to grab the knife again, but Susan blocked him, kicking the weapon farther away. Rain crashed harder against the windows as if urging the man to flee. And then he did. The stranger sprinted toward the exit, pushing past scattered chairs and terrified customers. He burst through the cafe door and disappeared into the storm, swallowed by the sheets of rain and darkness outside. For several seconds, the cafe remained frozen in the echo of the fight. The lights hummed softly. The rain roared. People stared, stunned, unsure if they were safe or still dreaming through a nightmare. Susan's chest rose and fell heavily as he stood there, breathing through the adrenaline, his body bruised but standing strong. His hand shook slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. Behind him, Brina stood trembling, her eyes wide, her breath uneven, her heart still struggling to calm itself. She looked at Susan's back, broad, steady, unwavering, and a wave of emotion crashed over her. She had never seen anyone fight like that for her. Not security officers, not friends, not anyone in her privileged, protected world. No man had ever stepped between her and danger with such raw courage, such instinctive selflessness. He didn't know her. He didn't ask anything. He just protected her. And in that moment, standing inches behind him, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. That she mattered to someone. That someone's first instinct was to keep her safe. The cafe slowly returned to a fragile calm after the police left, though the air still carried the weight of what had happened. Broken glass had been swept aside, chairs were being quietly put back upright, and the soft hum of conversation slowly returned. Though whispers kept circling about the brave man who had saved the young woman. Susan sat across from Brina now, the two of them sharing a small booth near the back. The warm light above them felt softer than before, gentler, almost protective. Brina held a small cup of tea in her trembling hands, but she hardly drank. Her eyes were fixed on him. Her gaze wasn't fearful anymore. It was searching, curious, almost tender. "Why did you protect me?" she finally whispered, her voice fragile, filled with a mix of disbelief and emotion. "You don't even know me." Susan looked down for a moment, as if trying to find the right words buried somewhere inside him. Then he lifted his eyes, and a small, gentle smile curved at the edge of his lips. It wasn't the smile of a hero. It was the smile of a quiet man who had lived enough life to understand pain. "Because someone needed help," he said softly. "And I have a daughter. I'd want someone to save her too." The warmth in his tone wrapped around her chest like a blanket. It was so simple, so honest, so heartbreakingly pure. Brina's breath caught. Her eyes softened, filling with emotion she hadn't felt in years. She blinked slowly, almost as if holding back tears. No one in her world ever did anything without a reason. People helped if it benefited them. People protected if there was something to gain. But Susan? A man who had nothing to offer except his courage and his heart, had protected her without hesitation, without wanting anything in return. "Your daughter is very lucky," Brina whispered. Her voice broke slightly, but she tried to hide it by lowering her eyes. You're an incredible father." A shy warmth blossomed across Susan's face. Compliments weren't something he heard often. Life rarely gave him praise. Only demands, responsibilities, and long nights. Her words touched him deeper than she knew. He leaned back, relaxing for the first time since the fight, and slowly, gently, they began to talk. Not like strangers, like two souls who suddenly found a quiet space in each other. They talked about life, about Susan's long shifts, how he tried to balance work and raising Emily, how tired he was, but how much he loved coming home to her drawings and bedtime stories. Brina listened with a softness that surprised even herself. She shared pieces of her life, too, the pressure of being the daughter of a billionaire CEO, the expectations placed on her shoulders, the loneliness that followed her everywhere despite having everything money could buy. Susan listened quietly, really listened. No judgment, no jealousy, just understanding. They talked about struggles, the ones they survived, the ones they hid, the ones they never admitted to anyone else. They talked about dreams. Brina wanting a normal life where people saw her for who she was. Susan wishing he could one day give Emily a home he wasn't constantly afraid of losing. Outside, rain continued falling and soft. steady waves painting the windows with delicate patterns. Thunder rolled gently in the distance, but inside the cafe the world felt small and safe. There was something warm between them now, an invisible thread, a delicate connection that neither of them fully understood, but both quietly felt. Brina watched him with a look she didn't try to hide anymore, a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and a strange, new affection blooming inside her chest. She had been saved tonight, not just from danger, but from loneliness she'd carried for years. And as Susan looked at her, something stirred in him too, something soft, unfamiliar, something that felt like the beginning of hope. Two people from different worlds sat together as if they had known each other forever, while the rain kept falling outside. And inside, something warmer, deeper, and unexpected was beginning to grow. Brina couldn't stop thinking about Susan, not just because he saved her life that night, but because he was real, humble, calm, and incredibly kind, something she rarely saw in her polished luxury world. She kept replaying his words in her head. I have a daughter. I'd want someone to save her too. No fancy suit, no ego, no hidden motive, just a good man doing the right thing. Meanwhile, Susan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, but he never tried to call her. Never searched for her online. Never stepped into that cafe again. He just went back to his simple routine, working long hours, cooking for his daughter, fixing things around the house. Part of him wanted to see Brina again. But a louder voice whispered, She's from a different world. You're just a single dad trying to get by. Don't dream beyond your limits. So he stayed quiet. But destiny wasn't done, not even close, because their worlds were about to crash into each other again. In a way neither of them saw coming. 3 days later, while Susan was fixing the loose boards on his small front porch, a long black limo glided silently down his narrow street. He froze. No car like that had ever entered his neighborhood. Kids stopped playing. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. The limo door opened, and Brina stepped out, holding a soft umbrella, wearing a warm smile that cut through the gray rain. Susan's heart almost stopped. She walked toward him slowly, heels tapping on the wet pavement, raindrops glowing behind her like diamonds. I've been looking for you, she said softly. Me? Susan blinked, confused and stunned. Brina nodded, eyes gentle. You saved my life, but that's not what I keep thinking about. She held his gaze. It was your heart. She reached into her handbag and handed him a small card, her personal number. I want to know you better, spend time with you, and maybe even meet your daughter, if you'll let me. Susan felt warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He couldn't hold back a small, genuine smile. I'd like that, he said quietly. And for the first time in a long time, the rain didn't feel cold. It felt like a new beginning. A week had passed since that unforgettable rainy night, and the world outside Susan's small house was alive with soft sunlight, a gentle breeze brushing through the trees. For once, life felt calm, almost magical, the kind of peace that makes the simplest moments shine brighter. Brina stepped into the backyard carrying a small basket, her hair tucked casually behind her ears, dressed simply, without the heavy layers of wealth and status she usually wore. She looked around at the little garden, the modest table, the string of lights hanging above, and a quiet smile curved her lips. Emily, Susan's 7-year-old daughter, ran up to her with the boundless energy of a child who trusted the world completely. Hi, you're Brina, she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. Daddy told me about you. Brina knelt down, laughing softly, and held out her hand. I'm so happy to finally meet you, Emily. Your dad tells me the most wonderful things about you. Susan watched them, his heart swelling with emotion. He had seen the world from the inside of exhaustion and responsibility, from long nights where no one truly noticed him. And now, here was a woman who didn't just see him, she respected him, valued him, and even admired the strength he carried every day. The three of them settled at the small table. Grilled chicken and roasted vegetables sizzled on the portable stove. There were no fancy dishes, no gold-plated cutlery, no decadent desserts. Just the smell of food cooked with care, warm laughter, and the soft glow of lights above. Brina felt something she had never experienced in her gilded life of wealth. A real family. A world without pretension. A world where love and kindness mattered more than titles, status, or money. She could breathe here. She could laugh freely, and she could be herself. Emily clapped her hands and pulled Brina into a small game of hide-and-seek around the garden chairs. Susan smiled, leaning back in his chair, feeling a quiet pride, knowing this simple joy was the kind of happiness money could never buy. As Brina laughed with Emily, Susan caught her eyes for a moment, and there it was, the silent connection that had started on that rainy night at Maple Street Café. It had grown quietly, steadily, like a small seed blossoming into something extraordinary. Their conversation flowed easily. They shared stories, hopes, and dreams. Brina talked about her longing for a life that felt real, while Susan shared small victories and daily struggles he had learned to embrace. Each word, each laugh, each glance slowly intertwined their hearts. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft orange and pink hues, Susan realized how deeply he had come to care for Brina, not for her wealth, her status, or her name, but for the kindness in her eyes, the warmth in her voice, and the genuine way she had touched their lives. Brina watched him too, noticing how quietly heroic he was, how brave and patient, how completely selfless with his love for Emily. She felt her heart fill with admiration and affection that went beyond gratitude. Soon, their friendship shifted naturally into something more tender. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was a gentle, slow-burning romance, built on respect, courage, and shared humanity. Every smile, every touch, every shared glance deepened the connection between them. Emily beamed, sensing the warmth between the two adults, hugging her dad and Brina simultaneously. The little family felt complete in that moment, even if the world outside still rushed by, oblivious to this quiet miracle. And as they sat together, the lesson became clear. Bravery, kindness, and a good heart mattered far more than wealth, status, or appearance. True importance came from selflessness, compassion, and courage. Sometimes, the strongest people are not the ones with titles or riches. They are the quiet, everyday heroes, the single parents who sacrifice, the ordinary people who protect others without recognition, the ones whose love runs deep and unseen. And sometimes, love finds you unexpectedly, in the most ordinary places, under the most extraordinary circumstances. It can arrive on a rainy night in a small cafe, through acts of courage that make your heart skip a beat, and through moments of pure, honest connection. Susan held Brina's hand gently, feeling the warmth of trust, the spark of something new, and the hope of a future he had never imagined. Brina squeezed back, smiling, feeling the same quiet certainty. The rain had passed long ago, but its memory lingered, a reminder that life could change in an instant, that a single moment of courage could redirect hearts, and that love could bloom even in the most unlikely places. And as the three of them shared the warmth of that backyard evening, laughter, food, light, and love, they knew one truth above all: happiness, connection, and the courage to care for others were priceless. It was a perfect, heartwarming ending, not because of wealth or luxury, but because it was real, gentle, brave, and filled with love.